Good morning or good evening to everyone who has joined us today. Welcome to the webinar on flat glass companies going into 2023, with the main question, is it to invest or to save in 2023? My name is Valērija Lieģe, and I'm partnered with Oaklands. I'm heading the glass processing playbook, and I will be your moderator today. You can see the exciting panelists. I will do a quick introduction with sort of a story on the M&A activity and the key trends that we see today. Then we will have Bettina Heuter, Marketing Director of Glass Global Group, the leading portal for the international glass industry, present us with the glass industry indicators and comment on the energy solutions for float glass producers and processors. After that, we will have Ulrich Brahms, the CEO of caleoglas, give us a story on caleoglas, which is a very exciting transformation from Saint-Gobain's units to actually a very flexible and market-adopted middle-sized company. He will tell us more about the current market outlook, and it explains on the strategy of the company. And then as a final panelist, we will have Vidur Kapur, my colleague from Oakland's TM Capital, present his view on the North American glass market and on the leading indicators for 2023. Okay, just a very brief summary on who the participants are. We're very excited to have more than 100 people. It's a very diverse group of people who is listening from more than 20 geographies, both private equity players with the interest in glass or with investments in glass, and strategics from both sort of middle-sized company, but also from the main players in the industry. Everyone from the people listening to the webinar has an option to post their question in the Q&A session, and I, as a moderator, will pass on the question to the panelists at the end of the webinar, which should last approximately 1 hour. So very quickly on Oaklands, the company organizing the webinar today. We are the mid-market investment bank, leaders in the mid-market, focusing on M&A sell side and buy side. We have more than 70 offices in 45 countries with 850 professionals. And we aim to focus on particular verticals, glass being one of those. Me, together with my colleague Reynolds, leading it in Europe, and Vidur heading it, co-heading it actually in North America. And on the next slide, you can see our expertise in the glass market. Just a few transactions that have been done in the last years, with mostly on the sell side, with both private equities entering the market and also with the strategics selling. On the next slide, I will sort of quickly show you where we are participating, except doing the deals with our clients. We keep the database of key players and the main transactions that are happening in the market to be up to date, with regular sector reports to C-level executives, sort of trying to spotlight on the main trends and on the most interesting companies that we see in the sector. And we visit the sort of most of the trade fairs and online events that happen in flat glass industry, and we have seen a lot of you actually in Glasstec this September. We have the main trends in the glass processing and finishing industry. And this is something that our panelists will cover in detail, right? So a lot has changed in the last 6-9 months. If before the whole attraction of the industry was in the new construction, right? So we were always saying that the buildings have more and more windows, and the new builds is the thing that is actually pushing the market forward. Now, in the period of uncertainty, we see a lot of companies who say that they are focusing now on renovation, and this is something that keeps them safe. On energy efficiency, if several months ago it was mostly reduction of the carbon footprint that was driving the industry, now with a huge jump in the energy prices, it's more and more about saving on the energy costs, right? Increased automation has always been sort of important, especially in the developed economies where labor is expensive and scarce. But now with the inflation going up, we see companies more and more thinking about how to make their production more effective. Innovation, always a trend, and helping the companies to be more attractive, especially for the new buyers, right? Bringing the margins up. And finally, supply chain management, something that became very acute in COVID times, and still a question mark on this, on delivery times and on availability actually of the resource material for the producers. Okay, so the panelists will comment on most of those issues. And just to finish up my portion on the next slide, we have the summary on the number of transactions in flat glass industry. So as you can see, on average, there have always been 12 to 20 deals per year. And the industry became sort of more popular somewhere in 2018 when actually private equities discovered the niche as an interesting place for investment. There was a drop in 2020 with COVID, but as you can see, 2021 and 22, we have seen a huge rebound in the number of transactions. And the question to today's panelists is actually, do they see that the trend in this field will continue or not, especially as we see from the deal split that the majority of the buyers is the PEs, right? And it would be interesting to see what our panelists think about the trends for the next 1 to 3 years. The deals that have been done are very much influenced by Saint-Gobain selling their units in more than actually now 15 transactions in various economies. And we see that the most divestments have been to the PE-backed buyers, although strategics have also done quite a lot recently with the Cardinal Glass and Glass Troche and Vidur sort of doing their deals in the industry. My next panelist will be Bettina, who will sort of cover the view from on operational side of the business, talking about the main indicators of the industry and what alternative energy solutions there are for the glass processing companies. Okay, Bettina, over to you.
Thank you so much for your welcome. And it was great to talk to this audience. My name is Bettina Heuter, and I'm Marketing Director to Glass Global Network. The network is available since October 2000, covering the whole glass industry value chain with technical information, market details, and everything in the value chain of glassmaking. I'm founding member of this network and proceed into the glass industry with some initial information on the next slide, please. So we have different business segments that go into the general community. We do detailed market analysis for flat glass factories, for processing companies, for the technology, and also cover different segments that go into the glass industry. On the next slide, you will see the head panel of our network, and we are the only platform as online market study with the detailed information about who's producing how much flat glass and where, so that the origin of the flat glass that is being processed in the world is absolutely clear and evident through our network. If we go to this next slide, you see an example of what I mean. The slide shows that over the world, over 580 flat glass factories and furnaces are operating both for float and pattern glass, which is used for PV modules, in over 320 production locations. You see a strong emphasis in Europe and of course in Asia, with China the biggest producer of flat glass all over the world. And in total, it is over 107 million tons in annual production capacity that are divided as given in the next slide. And there you see that Asia, with over 170 ton, has a million tons, has an emphasis, and this will persist in the industry. Oceania has just a little part in that, and Africa is a very strong future partner where we see interesting locations coming up for flat glass supply. The next slide goes in detail into Europe, showing where in Europe there are float glass factories that supply the local industries, with the largest ones in UK with 1,200 tons. And we have seen important mergers in this segment for float glass factories in the past, with Turkish company Şişecam taking over locations in Italy, and also changes from one big group to another that are in a bigger scale than flat glass processing companies. We are here still in the inbound upstream chain. The next slide shows where and how much glass is being produced for float glass and for pattern glass, that can be broken down into different streams of processing, whether it is for construction, laminated and tempered glass, whether it goes into interior, exterior. And that is the general view how the glass industry is being distributed and classified with regard to their activities. Of course, laminated glass can be tempered, it can be painted, decorated, cut to size. Insulated glass is being produced hereof, and therefore the construction industry relies on a very strong supply chain with regard to this segment. Pattern glass, as given on the list, is used for solar modules in monocrystalline. Flat glass in an ultra clear quality is being used for very high coated flat glass for facades or building applications, and in 10% of that application also for building integrated photovoltaic modules that can enhance facades and will take increasing share in buildings to replace conventional facade elements to produce energy. This is a very big part that goes into my later slides. The next slide will give an interesting view about how prices and capacities from China in float glass developed in the last 3 years. The blue bar is the trade value in million US. The orange bar was the matching net weight in kilotons. And you see that the prices have overtaken the capacities, so that there is a huge increase in prices that can be seen all over the world, and that will persist, especially with the energy surcharge currently given to European glass processing companies that vary week by week. And this is a factor that cannot be calculated at the moment, as it will not figure in the basis price, but will come up depending on how the current energy situation is. In Europe, one glassmaker has already closed a location because he had to face something like 9,000 euros per hour in energy cost, which made a calculation and the operation of that factory no more possible. And this factory is now mothballed and waiting for energy situation to change. The next slide gives a short view on what glass melting companies are currently facing to keep their production alive. The main issues are to supply the supply chain for energies. It is also raw materials with big suppliers from Russia or Eastern countries failing, especially for the European producers. It is the requirements to production processes, green and carbon neutral production. A German glassmaker had to overcome big obstacles to get another alternative energy medium allowed for his production, because the production line was given just for gas, and he has now changed to light fuel oil to keep the production alive. And there are trials underway to change the production in hybrid furnaces, to increase the electricity share in the production, to allow other combustibles such as hydrogen, biogas, or also alternative energies. A basis that has to be in every glass factory are air filtration systems, water recirculation systems, a general reduction of consumables, oils, paper, packaging material, change of LEDs in the complete factory, to reduce the overall carbon footprint of the production line, with a final aim to get a zero carbon production facility, which is almost not possible because glass needs gas and other fuels for melting, and this cannot be compensated in full by all other measures. Further obstacles before a new facility can be allowed is politics, to give an area free for industrial production. It is the local people on site that can stop such a project that had happened to Xinyi Glass to build up a facility in Canada, where the people have voted unanimously that this factory shall not be built in their location, and it has finally been dumped. It is a problem to get really good qualified staff for such a production, because it is a 24/7 very hard line. And also the overall cost for manpower goes up, which is also an obstacle. If we go to the next slides, you see that also energy consumption is a big issue, with the glass factories now trying to get alternative energies from wind and solar into their production lines. However, the uncertainty of solar energy or wind power are the biggest hindrance to get the glass factories to have that for the furnace. They will rather use it for the periphery or for the building in general. The next slide gives a view how the energy prices in EU have changed throughout the past year, which was one of the reasons why the European glass factory closed. This is something even the most negative outlook calculation could have foreseen, that this will happen. Now coming to the next slide, this gives a short view on the construction industry all over the world. This slide shows that construction, both in residential and commercial, will increase, with China and India, the Indian subcontinent, having the biggest share throughout 2030 and even into 2050. A big advantage for developed countries is that with the quality of the buildings, also the quality of the used glass and glass components will have to increase to cover the increased lifetime of these buildings. And this will also reflect in the application of higher and sophisticated applications with switchable glass, with fire-rated glass, with insulated glass in double and triple, and also there are again trends going on to have a vacuum insulated glass. The next slide gives some additional figures on that, with China having the biggest part and being 1/6 of energy in buildings globally. This is a high figure that also reflects the energy consumption in that country. Finally, I will go into a special product that will have a good impact into the industry. When you go on the next slide, it is fire-rated glass that protects people from getting damaged through a fire. Different qualities of fire-rated glass are around in the market, not only to protect the background or also the people in the backyard. When you go into the next slide, you will see how the market for that glass will go to increase throughout the next years because of the increasing requirements to the buildings and further. Bent glass and ceramic glass will have the largest shares in that compared to laminated glass. Finally, go to the next slide. The industry will switch to building integrated photovoltaic modules to enhance the buildings with own created energy. And this will also go into the grid as far as the network will allow. The next slide will show how the industry is going to develop until 2027 to enhance this industry considerably. And my final conclusion is that there will be an increase. Next slide, please. The solar market size will grow considerably. And in my conclusion on the last page of this paper, we see a high increase of construction throughout the world, with strongest in Asia, in China, but also very strong parts in Europe and USA, especially here with a higher quality of the glass needed. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Bettina. We'll now go to Ulrich, who will present the story of caleoglas and how it was created and how they see the future for this company.
First of all, thank you for having me here and giving us the opportunity to contribute to your webinar. I'd like to share with you some experience and thoughts from a perspective of a German glass processing and finishing company that was founded 2.5 years ago, right around the time where we were affected by the corona pandemic, frankly speaking. And looking back, that was really perfect timing. But let's start with a brief introduction of caleoglas. The owner of caleoglas is Eric Teilig, who has gained experience as a consultant in the M&A business and as well as restructuring business, like myself. And at one point in time, he decided to run his own business. So caleoglas was actually his second investment. Our approach is we pursue a buy and build strategy with the aim of gradually building up an industrial holding company rather than aiming for a quick exit. And as this is a long-term approach, I think this is necessary since there is no quick money here. It's rather a marathon than a sprint. So let's a quick note on the name caleoglas, shown on this side. The name caleoglas was created pretty much when the contract was signed at the notary office. It was more or less a spontaneous idea, but I think it fits perfect to the corporate mission, being an agile enterprise with, and of course the passion for glass. The word caleo originates from the Latin language and means to burn, to glow. So in March 2020, the 7 former glass solution plants of Saint-Gobain-Group became independent and part of the caleoglas group since the beginning of April 2020. So this year, we also took over the glass control Erfurt, which belongs now to us as well. So in total, we have 8 locations spread out all over Germany. We have 3 in the very north, nearby the Baltic, in Bremen, Potsdam, where the headquarters is located, the one in the east, Erfurt, and 2 in the south, in nearby Stuttgart and Freiburg. So in total, we have 450 employees. And as you can see, a very long tradition since the first plant was established and founded in 1878. So with the previous owner, Saint-Gobain, we still do have a very good collaboration and an intensive collaboration. So we certainly benefit from being a so-called Klima Plus Security partner, which is one of the largest European associations within the glass processing companies. The benefits are we do manufacture high premium glass, quality glass made in Germany, and we do have the so-called EPD certification, the Environment Product Declaration, which is a kind of seal for transparency. Talking about the product portfolio, so we consider ourselves as a kind of full range glass supplier. So we process the entire range from glasses for interior and exterior use, and we do individual paints as well as series, but we are not that type of high volume serial producer. This kind of competition doesn't make sense for us at all. So as far as the product range, of course, we make float glass, mirror glass, coated and patterned glass in many different designs, but the main products in terms of volume are ITU, insulated glass, and safety glasses like toughened and laminated glass. And of course, we have some specials, maybe next page, one of a bit more fancy product type, which is called Priva-Light. With this kind of solution, we can even switch transparent glass to non or semi-transparent glass with only one click. So as the headline says, an innovation or innovative, I'm convinced there is a way more coming up in the next years. Like Bettina pointed out, we have solar glasses, for instance, or I know that Saint-Gobain is developing very thin glasses as a contribution to low carbon activities. But I don't want to stress you, don't want to stress too much on product portfolio things. So let's talk about the transformation process we went through with caleoglas right after closing in March 2020. So the challenge was how to transform a set of different plants well embedded in a network of a huge corporate group like Saint-Gobain to a medium-sized structure, let's say, without jeopardizing the operational business. So on one hand, we said, let the folks do their daily business as usual, and at the same time, we put a project team in place managing the carve-out activities. So the time frame for this carve-out process itself was roughly 7 up to 8 months, and in this transition period until end of 2020, we had a transition service agreement with Saint-Gobain in order to make sure that the shared services like HR, finance, IT, etc., continue to run smoothly. So that helped us a lot during this transition stage. And looking back, the most important part of this carve-out procedure was the connection to the new IT infrastructure. That was a challenging part of all. And after setting up the new ERP system, we adapted all necessary IT modules, such as finance, order processing, production planning, scheduling, etc. And I remember for the folks, that was very, very important to know what will be changed and how am I affected by these changes. And having said that, I would say the change management is, in my mind, and was and still is the key success factor for the entire transition process. So regular updates, regular communication, your fixes and things like that, intense communication, that was absolutely key. So looking back 2.5 years, we've been intensively working on optimizations in terms of IT, structural topics, rules, standards, processes, and this is still ongoing. We are not at the end at all. But last but not least, changing the mindset of people towards, let's say, an entrepreneurial thinking of and also with a strong focus on margins. That was also kind of challenge for people who used to working in a huge company, in a huge a company like Saint-Gobain, and it was and still is a cultural change we are dealing with. So right after the closing in March 2020, we got hit by the COVID pandemic and its economical influences. As I said earlier, perfect timing. And you see here the timeline with the milestones that affected the economics in Germany 2020 and 21. We had a significant drop after the first lockdown in between March and May 2020. Then the German government set up a lockdown light between November and December, and the second lockdown ended in May 21. And interestingly, the order intake in the manufacturing sector recovered relatively quick, but we see the significant drop during the first lockdown in April 2020. So consequently, we had on one hand an increasing demand, but on the other hand, a reduced availability of raw material with supply bottlenecks. And even worse, at the same time, many raw material producers decided that now would be a perfect timing to maintain their production facilities. And normally that takes up to months. So that was really counterproductive. Ultimately, the price spiral, let's say, in raw materials began, and as everybody knows, the inflation in the Eurozone started. What is interesting, what happened with the glass price at the same time? So here you see the glass price index monthly published by the German Federal Statistical Office, which reflects the glass price development from 2020 until today. And most recently, even yesterday evening, I received the latest figure, which is now 232. So on the right-hand side, you see which is shown here, an index figure like 2015, and now it's shown that it's roughly 232, which means we have an exploding glass price index and ultimately very, very high and still increasing glass prices. So I don't need to mention that what happened with the gas price at the same time, and especially in the last couple of months. So we as a supplier of glass have been constantly forced to pass on the price increase to our customers, and this is unfortunately still ongoing. So surprisingly, if I look upon the construction industry itself, it remained relatively stable in 2020, but due to favorable construction interest rates and also the significant housing shortage in Germany. But let's have a look on the construction industry. So here is how the construction industry in Germany has developed in 22, and I believe, as far as I know, in Austria and Switzerland, we might have a similar picture. So housing construction makes the biggest part of the biggest share of construction industry, and it is kind of backbone for the construction industry. So if we look upon the development from 21 to 22, we see a significant, or let's say a considerable rise of plus 7%, but the number of building permits are already decreasing. So we will likely see this in the single family homes next year. And I was told, based upon studies or surveys being published, that two and multi-family houses seem to be more stable in the forecast. So in the middle, we have the commercial construction, which still seems to be suffering partly from the post-COVID effects. And we do have investment demands in this area, for instance, hospitals and office buildings, whereas the hotel and catering sector is less invested. But still in 22, we have an increase of plus 6%. And then on the other hand, on the right-hand side, we have the public building. In this area, we have in Germany, we do suffer from pronounced investment backlogs. Schools and roads in particular are affected here. And having said that, what is the influence on the glass industry? Still, I would say, and based upon what I've heard from colleagues and other partners, the order books are still full, but the order intake is slightly decreasing. And what we see is the project business is particularly affected, as there is a significant planning uncertainty. So what is the conclusion for 23 based upon recent market surveys? So I personally hear different forecasts, from optimistic cases down to serious contingency plans, let's say in terms of sales or turnover figures minus 30% compared to this year. So I personally don't anticipate a breakdown for the next year. The sales volume might be slightly decreasing, but there will be also promising changes in the market distribution, like the following. If we look upon the figures on the right-hand side, you see above the number of window units needed for the new construction business, and we see in between of the development from 21, 22, 23, we see a decrease of minus 8.6%. This is a forecast for next year. But at the same time, and that's a good part of the story, if we look upon the window units, produced window units for the refurbishment business or renovation business, if you will, we see slightly increasing figure of plus 3.6%. So this is what survey is saying in terms of what will happen next year in the German country, or Germany. Our outlook as far as caleoglas is concerned, we deeply, strongly believe in the construction industry as an absolute future industry. There might be some ups and downs, but in general, we anticipate a step-by-step growth of, let's say, 1-2% every year. Having said that, so we believe and we think it's possible, an organic growth should be possible based upon having premium products in place and not high volume products. And we also see opportunities and synergies within the group. And if the market volume in total will not increase, there are plenty of opportunities by competitive displacement. So that is something we are forced to do that, like other competitors as well. But furthermore, we are aiming for an inorganic growth through acquisitions in Germany and also in the near European countries, like the Baltics or some other countries, or the Nordic, which is also very interesting. Another challenge, which is which is getting more and more serious, is like the other presenters mentioned. So the next challenge is about hiring new talents. So like all industries, I would say we are right in the middle of a war for talents. The labor market seems to be empty, and we spend a lot of effort to attract new people. This is certainly going to be our next challenge in the future. This means that in addition to attract skilled workers and young talents, we'll also have to think about greater productivity and automation, and a higher degree of automation. Production facilities and digitized processes will be definitely a very important topic in the very near future. And those who had a chance to participate and visit the Glastech fair in Düsseldorf will definitely support that idea as well. Okay, that's all. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Ulrich. So as a summary, right, we've seen the most sort of the European picture, where both speakers, right, say that prices are up for the float glass. There are challenges in supply, and of course the energy prices are influencing the situation. But the view overall, I think, has improved, during the last months. There is no more sort of very stressful view on how the construction industry will develop, right? There is still certainty that long-term construction industry will be there. And the consolidation should help the companies go through this short-term period of instability. And also the premium products are the ones that sort of will improve the margins to those who can pass the price increases towards their consumers. So we'll now go to Vidur, who will tell us more about how North American market is doing in sort of both operationally, but also M&A wise. Okay, Vidur, to you.
Sure. Yeah, if we could just turn to the next page. I'll be covering just a quick intro of myself, Oakland's TM Capital, our transaction experience. Then I'll get into some market observations, both on the broader building product sector in North America, but also glass more specifically. What we're seeing in some of the publicly traded companies in the glass sector from a valuation perspective, and then I'll quickly wrap up. So if we could go to page 4. So yeah, I mean, good morning. I'm here dialing in from New York City, and good afternoon to those joining from Europe. My name is Vidur Kapur. I'm an associate director at Oakland's TM Capital. We're a US-based middle market investment bank. We got offices in New York, Boston, and Atlanta. I've personally been in the investment banking industry for over a decade, and I co-lead our North American glass efforts at Oakland's. At TM specifically, we have a very active industrials practice, including a specific focus on building products and glass. We publish annual building products report, which I co-author, and we just released last week, which you sort of see the screenshot there on the page and can be found on our website. And we're also a founding partner of the Oakland's Network, where we collaborate with the team globally on transactions. We've collaborated with Valērija and her team at Oakland's Baltics on several transactions, and the network's proven very valuable in providing our clients with access to bankers globally, as well as potential investors and acquirers. Here we've highlighted some of our completed transactions in the glass sector at TM, where we've been very active in recent years. Our transaction work spans glass processors, fabricators, and glazers. And we believe our experience has provided us with some unique insights regarding the industry dynamics in North America, the investor universe, and valuation drivers. Just at the beginning of this month, we closed the sale of Walker, which is a Montreal-based business, to Ironbridge Equity Partners, which is a Toronto-based private equity firm. Walker is a processor of glass and a market leader in acid-etched, premium quality mirror and bird-friendly glazing, and really sits at a unique position in the market as a raw material supplier. They're buying raw float, treating the surface, and then selling to fabricators as their customers. Then we've also worked with a number of fabricators in the architectural community that serve a wide range of end markets. Global and Lubac manufacture security glass, such as bullet-resistant solutions for embassies, detention centers, schools, and military vehicles. And we sold that business to Isoclima, which is an Italian-based producer backed by Sterling Square Partners. It's a UK-based private equity firm. So that was an international buyer acquiring a US-based business with 2 facilities here in the States. And really, because it was in that bullet-resistant category, they found it interesting. We've also worked with J.E. Berkowitz, which was a architectural fabricator doing a lot of the large tower work. NASG is a transit architectural producer that was serving applications such as rail cars, serving some of the leading transit authorities here in the States, including the MTA and the Chicago Transit Authority. And then finally, on the glazing side, we advised Old Castle Building Envelope, which is the largest fabricator here in the States, on a divestiture of their Canadian glazing operations called Antimex. Here, I'll dive into what we're seeing in the market. And on page 7, I really start with what we're seeing in really the building products market at a more macro level. I think our view of the market today is that there are some near-term challenges that the North American market is facing at a macro level from a building perspective, and are top of mind for the investment community. But we believe that the medium to longer term outlook remains very robust for a number of structural reasons that I'll touch on. On the left side of the page, I've highlighted some of the near-term challenges we're seeing here in the States and across North America. First and foremost is a significant rise in rates. The 30-year fixed mortgage rate has risen to around 7%. The result of that has made homes less affordable. That rise in rates has cooled near-term home buying demand. And so we've seen a shift away from home buying to home renting here in the States. On the material side, pricing and availability continues to be a challenge for the sector. In the building product sector as a whole, whether it's ready mix concrete, whether it's asphalt, whether it's roofing, siding materials, or glass, there's been a significant run up in the cost of inputs. And while we've seen some of those cost pressures ease in a number of categories, including glass, over the last few months, they still remain at an elevated level relative to recent history. And then on the labor side of the house, we continue to hear from our client base across the building product sector that finding quality labor is a challenge, and wages and competition for quality labor have continued to increase. And then on the right side of the page, look, I think there's structural reasons we believe and are bullish on the building product sector longer term. On the residential side, there is a massive shortage of available and affordable housing in the United States. It's been an issue that we've been grappling with for years. Single family housing starts, while they've rebounded quite nicely since the 08-09 recession, they have still not reached the peak level we saw prior to that period. And so there's still room for expansion there. There's a powerful demographic trend really supporting that home buyer market in the coming years. The millennial generation, many of whom delayed home buying, as well as Generation Z, have shown significant interest in home ownership. And they're starting to cross over into that age of sort of the medium home buying age. And so they're going to enter in mass to support sort of the resi side of the market. On the commercial side, we've seen a significant shift in end market demand as the market has shifted more and more towards e-commerce, growing technology usage, burgeoning medical innovation. And that's necessitating really a shift in repurposing, retrofitting, remodeling of commercial space. Coming out of the pandemic, we see that that's still really in early stages and should support the market for years to come as that repurposing takes hold. If we go to the next page, we're looking at some of the data and indicators we look at in the construction market as a whole. On the top left, it's a projection for the new construction market, and on the top right, you see the remodeling outlook. You'll see that the projections remain at robust levels, but I think in more recent third-party reports, we're seeing that folks are more cautious as they're starting to evaluate the construction outlook here in the States, and much of that is for the items I mentioned on the prior page with respect to the macro economy. I think what's more interesting is on the bottom of the page, on the bottom left. These are a couple leading indicators that we review here in the States. The left is the Dodge Momentum Index, which continued to climb in October. We've seen several end markets that were more heavily impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, like office buildings and hospitality, have seen a substantial rebound in demand, but construction and renovations are yet to catch up, which is propelling the market. And then the sustained upward trajectory in the Momentum Index really demonstrates optimism from owners and developers that projects will continue to progress despite the concerns of a potential economic recession that you read about in the news. And then on the bottom right, the Architectural Billings Index, the ABI, where a score above 50 indicates growth from the previous month. You'll see that through September, levels continue to remain above 50, but if you go under the hood, you'll see that the Northeast US and institutional sector really reached high pace of growth, where there's starting to be some weakness in certain pockets of the market in terms of architects looking at their billings on a go-forward basis in multifamily, resi, and commercial sectors. And so I think that's ties together with folks being just more cautious on the market. And if we go to the next page to touch on the glass market more specifically, I think there's a number of reasons. You'll see projected growth here for reasons that folks expect the glass market to continue to experience growth in the US and in North America. For one, there's continued strong commercial and residential remodeling and construction demand. There's powerful architectural design trends. Natural light is top of mind for the architect community. Glass heavy designs continue to be in focus. Energy efficiency, sustainability, environmentally friendly building practices are becoming increasingly critical. We've seen that the architect community is green by nature and support an increased use of glass. And there are a number of trends rising in prevalence that you'll see on the top right, like decorative, security, and jumbo glass. And then on the bottom right, much like other building products companies, glass companies are facing challenges and focus areas like material sourcing, labor availability, looking for more differentiated capabilities, and then automation and finding, obviously, labor is a core cost and a rising cost in today's environment, and one that they're trying to evaluate how best to grapple with. If we dive into the next section on valuation, really just looking at a handful of publicly traded companies here. And this list isn't limited just to North America, as there are only a handful of publicly traded sort of glass-focused players here. You'll see Apogee and PGT are in the States, Vitro is based in Mexico, Saint-Gobain in France, Sisicam in Turkey, Tecnoglass in South America. And while these companies vary substantially in market capitalization, on a median basis, they're trading just north of 1x revenue and 6 to 7 times EBITDA on an enterprise value basis. If we turn to the next page, we benchmarked these companies against one another in terms of revenue growth and margins. You'll see on the top right bar chart that these companies are experiencing very strong top line growth here in 2022 across the board. And from a margin perspective, what's interesting is we see that those with more specialized and higher value capabilities, as well as those with cost advantages from a production perspective based on where they may be producing, are experiencing higher margins than those that aren't in those categories. And then if we finally just go to the sort of page 14, I can wrap up here just to summarize some of our thoughts. I think as we covered, look, I think there's a confluence of issues in the macro economy here in North America in terms of challenges that they're facing. But again, for structural reasons, we see resi and commercial construction as having long legs here in North America. Within glass, the focus areas of energy efficiency, sustainability, environmentally friendly applications, specialized growth areas, security, safety, decorative, jumbo glass, as being areas that will propel growth. With respect to M&A volume, Valērija showed you some of those transactions in the market in her introduction, and we've seen a flurry of glass transactions in the last 12 months. In particular, in the States, 2 of the largest glass fabricators have traded to private equity firms, Oldcastle Building Envelope and Trulight, both in this year, and they're 2 of the largest fabricators. And so now with 2 of the largest fabricators backed by 2 large private equity firms that have substantial resources, we see increased opportunity for investment consolidation and for the future, like automation. And so strategics and private equity seem to be recalibrating their theses generally to focus their time and efforts on areas they find compelling given the macro environment. And so I think in general, folks are viewing the market as having a bit of uncertainty with these near-term issues. But I think once there's more certainty around interest rates, rental prices, material prices, labor availability, we think M&A will accelerate in the glass sector. And that really concludes my thoughts here on the North American market, and appreciate you all for listening.
Thank you, Vidur. Then from what Vidur said, right? We do see a more positive outlook, right, in the long term. So we would see a bit of the issues in the near term, but sort of overall, we see the glass market, all of us, right, as something that will be there and will be interesting for the investors. But what are your thoughts about what should be the characteristics of the company to be interesting for the sort of to be an M&A target now, right? In the time when there are the near-term challenges. Vidur, if you could start sort of on the back of your presentation, and then we'll switch to the.
Sure. Yeah, I think attractive M&A targets here in North America, where we've seen greater interest, would be one, scale is important. Two is, I'd say, sort of facility geography, location, and number of facilities we've seen. And then having differentiated capabilities and know-how in terms of whether that's being in, I'd say, more differentiated capabilities lend itself to higher margins, whether that's in categories like security, like we mentioned, bent or curved glass, acid etched glass, bird friendly glass, fire rated and hurricane resistant glass. These are just some of the areas where we've seen folks have greater interest. I think end market exposure is also one that investors are increasingly focused on. New construction versus renovation and remodel, and whether you're tied to large projects or smaller projects. Having more diversity is viewed more favorably by the investment community, as tower work can be more lumpy in nature. And then in general, just the growth trajectory folks are on. With all the price increases in the market, we've seen many of the leading fabricators and glazers performing quite well. And I think investors are very focused on, will these price increases hold, and what's your differentiated market position that will enable you to grow off what appears to be an elevated base for many companies.
Okay, thank you. Bettina, your view?
My view is that companies that are interesting as a target either have a special product that they are offering, such as laminated, tempered, triple insulated, or any specialty glass, or they have a very good geographic location that is prominent to the market and has a good area for delivery and sales.
Okay. And Ulrich, the person who has the money and is actually investing, what is your view on that?
Yeah, from the operational point of view, what really counts is, first of all, the company has to be profitable. So I mainly have a look upon the product portfolio, and hopefully we'll see reasonable margins within the products, and ideally a broader product range than having only one single product in place. And the same is for the customer structure. Due to risk reasons, we normally focus on how is the customer structure, and do we have a certain dependency on major customers, so things like that. And last but not least, in many cases we've seen, and this is a key criteria, how is the structure of the management team. So we rather like management teams, let's say a collection or collective of several different good managers, than having a dependency on one single person, so a kind of one-man show. These are certain things which is very important for us.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. So we are a bit over the time limit, so thank you for the participants for actually having presented the very insightful things from their experience and from what they see in the market. We will summarize the thoughts and distribute the newsletter, and the webinar will also be available to the participants. Okay, thank you so much, and have a lovely evening or morning whenever you are.